us as they can. Good morning, everyone. This is a meeting of the Howard County delegation, and we are very pleased and honored this morning to be joined by Congressman John Sarbanes. And in the interest of time, we're going to get right to it. And thank you so much, Congressman, for being here and for taking some time to share an update with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, Jessica, thank you. It's great to be with you all this morning. First of all, let me thank you for the good work that you do every single day. Obviously, we continue to plow through a very stressful time for ourselves and our own families, but just as importantly for those that we represent, that we reach out to every single day and try to lift up amidst these challenges. And obviously we see some light at the end of the tunnel, but it's a responsibility of all of ours to make sure that we stay focused on the things that are going to keep us safe, get us to the other side of this pandemic. And so I just wanted to start off by giving my appreciation to you for all the great constituent work that you're doing and sort of collectively representing the interests of the community. I do, on that note, also want to observe that your constituents and my constituents include many in the Asian American Pacific Islander community. And I know members of that community have been shaken really to the core in recent weeks by the shootings in Atlanta, but also by the unveiling of what is this level of sort of bigotry that's been targeting members of that community for some time now. And it's incumbent on all of us to, again, have a collective and sustained response to that. So I hope that the conversation we've been having over the last few weeks continues and that finds its way towards action that can lift up that community as we try to lift up all communities across our country. I just wanted to give a very brief update on the American Rescue Plan. There's a lot coming from that. There was a $1.9 trillion relief plan, as you know. It's that big because it's designed to meet the needs of a diverse set of interests, communities, constituencies across our country. On any given day, the pressure on a family may come from a different source. For some, it may be the need for mortgage or rental assistance. For others, it's the need for unemployment insurance. For others, it's nutrition assistance. For a small business, it's that lifeline in the form of the Paycheck Protection Program and the loans and grants that are available there, et cetera. So depending on your circumstance, you may have a different need, but if we look at the entire country and the interests of our constituents, we need a plan that is as broad-based as the American Rescue Plan. And just to mention quickly, I think you're familiar with it, obviously in your roles, but Howard County will be receiving about $63 million as part of the direct state and local government response to the needs that we see out there. That's part of $6.4 billion almost coming to state and local, to Maryland plus local governments from the American Rescue Plan. Of course, a tremendous amount of resources going to the continued fight to beat back the pandemic, whether it's continued research into therapeutics, standing up better diagnostic structure across the country, comprehensive plan, or continuing with the manufacture and distribution of vaccines. We know we're in a kind of tricky place right now because people are rushing to get the vaccine, but in a sense, it's sort of like rushing to get to a building when it's pouring rain and you make a judgment of whether you can get there without getting soaked or not. And we have to understand that the protective measures we've taken to make sure that we are safe as we get to the vaccine opportunity need to remain in place. I think some people out there kind of cutting and running towards the vaccine and forgetting about the protective measures. We have to do both so we avoid a fourth surge that could be coming at us. But a lot of resources behind that. As I mentioned, small businesses, the smallest businesses are ones that we've been focused on in recent months, and there's significant support there in the American Rescue Plan. Direct payments, 2.5 million households in Maryland will be getting direct payments. These are the $1,400 payments for individuals finding their way to Marylanders. That's about $6.2 billion coming into Maryland just for that piece of the American Rescue Plan. Many of you have heard that with the expansion of the child tax credit, making it refundable, forward funding it on a monthly basis, et cetera, will cut childhood poverty across the country by almost half. This is an incredible step forward for the country. In Maryland, I think that's 50,000 children that will be lifted out of poverty, and 1.1 million children, almost 85% of children in the state, will see increased benefits. Expansion of the earned income tax credit will benefit about 250,000 Marylanders, and then the unemployment insurance extension and enhancement, 300,000 Marylanders will benefit from that. I know that you're frustrated, and I'm frustrated as well by the Department of Labor's ability to process all of these claims. Continued, I think, frustration certainly on the part of many of our constituents. So we're leaning in on that department in Maryland to try to get the process improved, make sure that it's more responsive, et cetera. But at least the federal dollars coming in can help support those enhanced benefits. Education, child care dollars coming into the state will be significant. Better access to the exchanges through enhanced subsidies under the Affordable Care Act that will lift up more families in terms of the affordability of health care. Dollars coming in for Head Start, and other things of that nature. So there's a lot in there. I know you all will be processing, as I'm doing every day, exactly what it looks like, how it will get delivered, how it will meet the priorities of your constituents. But it's broad-based, and I think an outstanding response. I wish we had had Republican support for this bill. It eludes me why not one Republican in the Senate or the House would support a bill that 77% of Americans favor. But that's just what the political reality is. We feel good about it. We think it meets the need. And we do think that Americans out there appreciate the swift action that President Biden took. Just to close it up here, because I don't want to take too much time. What's coming next is the American Jobs Plan. President Biden will be discussing that today in a press conference. This is infrastructure, both physical and human infrastructure investments in a significant way, and also looking at some retooling of the tax code to recover some of what was given away to the very wealthy and to corporations with the tax plan that went in place under President Trump previously. But this is a way to lift up the country and sort of get the engine of the economy moving beyond the pandemic. Last thing I'll mention is H.R. 1, the For the People Act, that I've been working on for many, many years. As we've seen this stampede towards voter suppression across the country in many, many states, 43 states, 250 bills introduced at the state level to block access to the ballot box. People have been saying, oh my God, what are we going to do to stop this? And we've been able to say, well, we've been working on something for the last 5 years that would do exactly that. It would, through all sorts of voting reforms, many of them introduced for years by my late colleague, John Lewis, make sure we clear a path to the ballot box. We fix partisan gerrymandering in this country. We insist on ethics and accountability, and we address campaign finance reform to restore people's voices. two observations on this bill, and then I'll close. Former Attorney General Eric Holder said the other day that if you look at the voting reforms in H.R. 1 and you connect them to the reforms in the John Lewis Voting Rights Act so that they kind of work together going forward, it represents the most consequential set of voting rights and civil rights reforms that we've seen in a generation. If you look at the ethics reforms and the campaign finance reforms, it represents the most robust anti-corruption legislation ever passed in the House, where we passed it 3 weeks ago, and then brought to the Senate for consideration. So together, all the various parts of H.R. 1, the For the People Act, now designated as S1 in the United States Senate, represent a real opportunity to restore the voice of Americans. And at a time of great peril for our democracy, strengthen it, nurture it, and get it back on its feet. So very privileged to have been working on that bill for years now, and to see the opportunity to get it done. With that, I will yield back to you, Jessica. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Congressman. And to the delegation members, if you can just let me know in the comments if you have a question for the Congressman. I want to start off by thanking you for everything you're doing, and for the help that your office provides as we're attempting to serve constituents who are really struggling in this time. And I know that's something that our staff members work very hard on, and work very closely with your team. And so I want to give them a shout out. Your staff has been a tremendous resource whenever we need help at the federal level. And I see that Vicki is on the line with us, so always appreciate her help.
Thanks so much. We enjoy the partnership, and we know it's critical in terms of serving our constituents. So thank you. I did also want to give a shout. I know you have some students and young people in the call.
Yes.
Thank them for
yes. So
they're actually leading in many ways this charge on democracy reform in America. So I definitely appreciate that. We need their voices at this moment. It's absolutely critical.
Great. So we're going to take a few questions from members. First up, Delegate Hill.
Thank you. Good morning, Congressman. And I would echo what the chairman has said about what a privilege it is to be represented by you and our delegation, people who are so responsive to our needs. We really appreciate that. The question you mentioned, the Trump era tax cut, which my question is, are there some fade outs of the middle class tax cuts on the horizon that could stand to undermine what you all and this administration is doing, and reflect as if this administration is raising taxes in the next few years? And if those are on the horizon, I kind of remember something about the upper class tax cuts being permanent and the middle class ones being negative. Are you all looking to make sure that the messaging is out there that those are not being imposed by this administration? They've already baked into the cake.
I think the conversation is going to start, and it probably will end at looking at the highest income levels. When you look back at, it's interesting, the tax bill that was passed under the last president was also designated as H.R. 1, S1. In fact, in the last 20 years, any bill that's gotten that designation in both chambers of Congress has become law. So that's a good omen for our H.R. 1, S1. But when you look back, the calculation is that about 83% of the benefits of those tax cuts went to the wealthiest Americans and to corporations. And I think that's where the conversation about sort of revisiting those tax provisions will start. If 83% of the tax cuts came from that source, you can recover significant revenue if you go in and revisit that particular piece of it without getting to the pieces that you mentioned. That conversation is just starting. It'll be a tricky one. because the messaging around it can get kind of confused and sort of supercharged, as we know. But I think it's appropriate, particularly if the resources you're raising and the revenues are going to the kinds of investments that the president is going to unveil today, investments in infrastructure that can create jobs, human infrastructure, all the things that we know people want to see to lift themselves up across the country. So it's just important to have that in this conversation, and I think it's appropriate, and I commend the president for doing that.
All right, and next up, my co-chair, Senator Lamb.
Thank you. And I just want to thank the congressman for citing a note of concern about the incidences of bias or discrimination or even potential hate crimes against the Asian American communities. That there is a lot of angst in the community, and I appreciate the personal outreach too from the congressman about this issue. And I think your voice and leadership on this would be much appreciated, and hope that you'll continue to do that as well. The community is not only very anxious, but concerned and frustrated in many ways about the tone and the incidents that have occurred. And so this is not going to wrap up anytime soon, but in Howard County, and the last time I checked, many people might already be aware of this, but we have the highest proportion of Asian Americans in our population of any county. We even edge out Montgomery County when it comes to the number of Asian Americans by percentage of the population. And so this is a significant concern to many Howard Countyans. And again, just appreciate your outreach on that, and hope you'll continue to champion this as an issue in Congress in the future.
Well, thanks very much. I appreciate it. I mean, my perspective, and I'm glad you noted the significant population within Howard County of Asian Americans. But it's not just a number. It represents a community that has continuously reached out to the broader community and lifted it up. And in times of crisis like the one we're facing now, where certain communities are feeling targeted and threatened, it's a responsibility for the broad, diverse whole community, in this case of Howard County, Maryland, and obviously across the country as well, to respond with the same generosity of spirit that we see coming from these diverse communities. And so this is a partnership. And the other thing you mentioned, which I'm very sensitive to, it's an inevitable fact of life in the United States, and maybe just in the 21st century, but there's always something new that comes along that pulls people's attention away from yesterday's tragedy or crisis or challenge. It doesn't mean yesterday's challenge is over for the affected communities. It just means the focus shifts to something new. So it's important for us as policymakers and community leaders to maintain that focus and sustain it, so these communities don't feel like they're being left behind again. And so an ongoing conversation, and one, as I say, that is always finding opportunities to be converted into action, is critical here. I look forward to working with all of you to make sure that's the case in responding to the concerns and anxiety and apprehension within the Asian American community in Howard County.
Thank you, Congressman. Back to my delegation co-chair, Delegate Feldmacher.
All right, thank you. Next up, Delegate Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Feldmark. I appreciate you being here, Congressman, this morning. I also want to echo the thoughts about the Asian American community. I was in an event last night in Ellicott City with female entrepreneurs who happen to be Asian American also, and they too are concerned and want to move forward as a community. One of the things that you mentioned, a few things you mentioned about bipartisanship. One thing you brought up also was the gerrymandering. And I was just wondering if you could talk about how you might see Maryland changing in our next set of congressional maps, given that your bills are going through the House and the Senate right now to discuss gerrymandering.
Yeah, so this has been an important part of the reform package from the beginning. We've always viewed it as something that needs to be fixed nationally. In other words, you need these independent redistricting commissions, which is what the bill provides for, and some very strict objective criteria for how they're formed and what guides their work to be in place in every state and country. The reason for that is that if you do it some places and not others, in the places where it's not happening, the politics just get even more intense and partisan. So a national solution is what's preferred, and that's what's included in the bill. If we get the bill passed, you will see these independent commissions going into place in every state. That would include Maryland, and it would be subject to these criteria that are established. So it's definitely going to impact how redistricting occurs here and elsewhere. It's hard for me to know where that lands in terms of actual district lines and what the makeup will be at the congressional level after you have an election with those new lines. But I do think it's a process that demonstrates respect for voters. And it's something we've certainly heard from voters for many, many years. It polls very high as a reform in blue states and red states across the country. And that's why we wanted to make it part of the overall package. So we'll see how this reform goes. Just on that note, HR 1S1 polls with solid majorities among Democrats, independents, and Republicans. There are many parts of the bill which have bipartisan origins, including reforming gerrymandering, fixing the Office of Government Ethics and the Federal Election Commission, combating foreign interference in our elections, creating more digital ad platform transparency, and fighting back against super PACs and secret money with more disclosure, et cetera. So we feel very good about this bill responding to the broad interests and concerns of Americans of all political stripes.
Thank you so much, Congressman.
Thank you. Next up, Delegate Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think that we've been together since before session with you, Congressman, and I wanted to take a moment to express the delegation's condolences on the loss of your dad, Senator Paul Sarbanes. We all knew him personally, and we respected his record of service. He was a teacher to many of us, and it makes me feel good to know that he was in the House of Delegates. So he sat in the seats that many of us are sitting in. His service in the House of Reps, the U.S. Senate, and it just strikes me that this bill that you've been working on for 5 years, the Voting Rights Act, is as massive and as important as the Sarbanes-Oxley Act that he authored many, 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 many years ago, which reformed public accounting and provided protection for investors. Your bill is massive and important in a different way by reforming campaign finance and protecting voter rights. And so it's a great legacy, and I just wish your family well, and I know that we all extend our sympathies.
Well, I appreciate that very, very much. And I thank everybody for the remembrances that have come in about my dad. They continue to come in. I'm not being as deluged as I was in the first days after he passed away. I do count as a blessing the fact that he did not live long enough to see the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. That was where he worked for 36 years. I think it would have broken his heart. But I think the most powerful tributes to him, and there have been many, is that he just wanted to do the work. He felt deeply about representing the interests of his constituency. He understood that small things matter, and that you have to find ways to demonstrate your principles and values and your commitment to American democracy from the moment you get up in the morning to when you go to sleep at night. I know that's what carries you all forward in public service, so I really appreciate that. I will say that he thought my pursuit of these broad campaign finance reforms in particular was somewhat quixotic, because he understood how hard it is to get the status quo changed in Washington. So this is definitely not going to be an easy fight. But the story of this bill has been the things we thought were impossible yesterday suddenly become possible today. And so we're going to keep pushing forward and hopefully get it across the finish line. So thank you for your remarks. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Congressman. We appreciate your perseverance. So please keep up the good work on our behalf. And I know your time is tight. You are certainly welcome to stay with us, but we really appreciate you being here and taking the time to catch up with us. It really means a lot.
Chair Feldmark, Chair Lamb, and all the members of the delegation from Howard County. Again, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you for your terrific work. And look forward to continuing to partner on behalf of the people that we serve. Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care. Okay, so moving right along, we are, as the Congressman pointed out, joined by several students this morning. These are our Maryland General Assembly pages from this session from Howard County. And of course, this year has been a little different. And one of those differences is we haven't had the opportunity, as the page program proceeded on a virtual basis, we haven't had the opportunity to meet you on the floor. So so appreciative that you all took the time to join us this morning. And I want to just really briefly give you a chance to introduce yourselves. Just tell us your name, what part of the county you're from. If you know your district, great. If not, you can just give us the town and what school you go to. And we are going in no particular order other than the mystery of Zoom and how you are arranged on my screen. And so first up, we have Nehal.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. My name is Nahal Naqvi. I live in Laurel, Maryland, and that's in District 13, and I go to Atherton High School.
Thank you. Next up, Chris.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christopher Ladard. I'm a resident of Ellicott City and a proud resident of District 9B, and I go to Centennial High School.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up, Prerna.
Hi, everybody. My name is Prerna Pulapalli. I live in Ellicott City as well. I'm under District 9B, and I go to Marriott's Ridge High School.
Yay. Thank you. Anna.
Hi, everyone. My name's Anna. I live in Columbia in District 12, and I go to Notre Dame Prep in Charleston.
Wonderful. Eduardo.
Hello, my name is Eduardo Marin. I live in Columbia, Maryland. I'm in District 13, and I go to Oakland Mills High School.
Thank you. And Joshua.
Hi, guys. My name is Josh. I'm a resident of Columbia, Maryland, District 12, and then I go to Long Reach High School.
Yay. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us this morning. We know this has been a different experience, but we really appreciate you all taking the time to participate and helping serve the General Assembly. Senator Lamb, I don't know if you wanted to add a comment here.
On the pages?
Yes.
Sure. Well, we certainly welcome them for their service to the General Assembly. I know it's a little bit odd this session with it being virtual. I know many of us have tried to schedule opportunities to be able to meet with you personally too. So please feel free to reach out to us. I think we all welcome that opportunity to be able to connect with you and to try to kind of give you a sense of what it's actually like down here as much as possible, given that your experience has been a little bit different this year. So we hope to be in touch. Thank you.
And I'll add, if if any of you want to visit when we're back to a reality where visiting in person is an option, I think all of us would welcome the chance to have you come on down maybe next session. So, and you all are welcome to stay with us and learn a little bit more about local aid. Our next agenda item is actually a briefing from the Department of Legislative Services on the fiscal year 22 budget and local aid to Howard County. So if you have time and can stick around, please stay with us. And we're joined this morning by Hiram Birch from Department of Legislative Services to tell us a little bit more about state funding for Howard County. So
okay, good morning. I do have a briefing document. If I could introduce it share it with the screen. Is that possible?
Yes, I think we need to make you a co-host to do that. Abby, are you able to take care of that? Okay, you should be able to.
And Madam Chair, you were gracious enough to, I think we have that sent to us if we're having trouble reading it on our screens. It's available.
Correct, it is in your email.
Thank you.
Great. All right, if we turn to page 4 of the document, I'm just going to touch on the highlights because there's a lot of information in this report. You can see that Howard County will receive around $400 million in state funding in fiscal 2022. Of this amount, around $332 million is direct aid, and this funding will go directly to the local government. Around $65 million is for retirement payments. This represents a 1.9% increase in state funding over the prior year, with total state aid increasing by $7.4 million from the prior year. Direct funding will increase by $4.9 million, and retirement payments will increase by $2.5 million. The majority of state aid to local governments goes to the public school systems. For Howard County, around 75% of state aid will go directly to the local school system, and 15% of state aid will cover teacher retirement payments. So in total, around 90% of the state aid that goes to Howard County goes for public education. The county government gets around 2% of the state aid that goes to local governments. You can see that in fiscal 2022, this year, Howard County public schools will get around $300 million in direct funding. This is a $3.4 million or 1.2% increase from the prior year. State funding for teachers' retirement payments will total around $59 million, which is a $2.4 million increase. We will now focus our attention to the state funding that is provided to the county government. If you turn to, and you can see here that around $8.8 million will be provided to the county government. If we turn to page 7 or page 12 of the report, it shows you the amount of funding that goes to the police aid program. And you can see that the Howard County is scheduled to get around $3.9 million in funding for the police aid program. And as you can see on page 13, most of the funding that is provided to local governments is based on population density. The majority of funds is based on this, and more urbanized jurisdictions receive a higher per capita grant amount because they have a higher population density. Around 5% of the funding is based on the number of municipal sworn officers. If we turn to page 15, it provides information on the level of funding for fire and rescue aid. And here, Howard County would get around $600,000 in funding. The state allocation for the fire aid program is based on each jurisdiction's share of property tax accounts out of the statewide total. And there is a minimum $300,000 in funding for each jurisdiction. And if we turn to page 17, and 19, it provides information on local highway user revenues. And here you can see that Howard County is scheduled to get around $3.6 million in funding. Funding for county and municipal governments is based on each jurisdiction's share of road mileage and vehicle registration. Under the program, a certain amount of funding is allocated to Baltimore City. County governments gets a certain portion, and then municipal governments gets a certain portion. And then the county and municipal share is allocated based on road mileage and vehicle registration. So for the county government, the three main programs that they receive funding for is police aid, fire aid, and local highway user revenues. Now we're going to focus our attention to education aid, which is the main unit that receives funding. And if you turn to page 26 of the report, it puts the funding on a per pupil basis. And so here you can see that the Howard County school system would get around $356 million in funding. On a per pupil basis, this is around $6,400 per pupil. Direct aid is around $5,300 per pupil, and funding for teachers' retirement is around $1,100 per pupil. And you can see that Howard County is ranked 19th in the state based on funding on a per pupil basis. And this is due to the fact that most of the education aid provided to local governments is based on local wealth. And we'll go over that in a minute. If we turn to page 28, you can see that on a per pupil basis, funding for the Howard County school system is going up by 4.1%. And there are several factors that is affecting the level of funding that is provided to local governments this year. Typically, local school systems funding is based on their increase in student enrollment and the impact on local wealth. However, this year, due to the sharp decline in student enrollment that has resulted from the COVID-19 pandemic and the implementation of online instruction, there's been a significant decrease in funding that has been provided through the education funding formulas. And so you can see that on page 33, for the major funding formulas, if we just base it on the current student enrollment count, state aid would have gone down by $204 million. However, the governor has provided around $214 million in hold harmless grants to prevent this decrease in funding from happening. And as you can see, Howard County is projected to get around $7.9 million in the hold harmless grant, which will prevent the school system state aid from declining this year due to the lower student enrollment counts. If we go back to page 32, it provides information on the level of state funding that is provided under the Blueprint initiatives. And you can see around $500 million is provided statewide under the current Blueprint plan. Howard County is scheduled to receive around $11.9 million in funding. This includes around $4.2 million for supplemental instruction and around $2.7 million for special education grants. The school system will also get around $500,000 for full-day pre-kindergarten programs, and they are eligible to receive additional funding under the early childhood expansion. A considerable amount of funding is also based on targeted student populations. You can see here for the compensatory aid program, the funding is based on free and reduced price meal count. We also have the English language learners program and special education. And here you can see that Howard County's public schools is expected to get around $60 million in funding under these programs. You can see that the per pupil amount is quite low compared to other jurisdictions. And this is due to the fact that Howard County has the fourth lowest share of students receiving these targeted funds. You can see that for the targeted student index, Howard County is at 39.1%. And this index adds together the percent share of students that are approved for free and reduced price meals for English language learners and for special education services. And you can see that statewide, around 64% of students receive these services. It ranges from around 29% in Carroll County to over 100% in Baltimore City. And the reason why Baltimore City's index is over 100 is that there's some overlap in children that receive compensatory aid and the other two programs. We will now briefly look at the student enrollment trends. So if we go to page 43, it kind of shows you what is happening this year. Statewide, student enrollment is down by 2.3%. As you can see, only one school system in the state actually had an increase in their student enrollment, and that was Dorchester County at 0.5%. Queen Anne's County had a 4.5% decrease, and Howard County is kind of in the middle with a 2.8% decrease. And so this is the main reason why we had the Hold Harmless grants this year, because this is basically an anomaly, and it's basically due to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and virtual learning. As you can see that Baltimore City only had a 0.6% decrease in their student enrollment. And that was a school system that typically has declining student enrollment. Typically, all the other school systems typically has increases in their student enrollment. So this definitely is an anomaly this year. This is also is evident in our targeted student populations. Here you can see that statewide, there's a 6.7% decrease in the number of students approved for free and reduced price meals. But in Howard County, there's actually has been an increase of 1.8%. You can see here that Howard County has the third lowest share of students approved for free and reduced price meals at around 22%. The state average is around 41%. And the highest is in Baltimore City, where 88% of their students are approved for free and reduced price meals. The next page gives us information on the number of students that are identified as English language learners. And here you can see that around 10% of the state's students are English language learners. And Howard County is ranked 10th with 6% of the student population identified as English language learners. And here you can see that there is a 2.4% decrease in the number of English language learners in Howard County. The next page provides information on students receiving special education services. And here you can see that Howard County has the third lowest share of students receiving special education services at 10.7%. The statewide average is around 12.8%. So as you can see, for the targeted student populations, Howard County has a relatively low portion of students receiving these services, and that does impact the overall amount of funding that is provided for public schools. In addition, the funding under the current bill and the Blueprint initiatives, a large portion of that funding is targeted to students receiving special services, particularly the Concentration of Poverty Grant. As you can see on page 47, Howard County has the highest percentage of the share of their overall population that are public school students. 17.1% of county residents in Howard County are public school students. The statewide average is 14.1%. We will now focus a little bit on local wealth. And if we go back to page 40, it basically shows you how local wealth is calculated. It's basically a combination of your local property wealth and your local income wealth. And these are the two main revenue sources for local governments. It's around 90% of the local revenues for Howard County. As you can see, that overall, Howard County has the 8th highest local wealth index. When you look, which is around 111% above the statewide average. If you look at property wealth, once again, Howard County is ranked 8th with their per pupil wealth at around 106% of the statewide average. And for local income, Howard County is ranked 4th at around 120% of the statewide average. Now, due to your overall higher share of public school students, you can see that your per pupil ranking is slightly below your overall per capita rank. When you just look at per capita, Howard County is basically the 3rd wealthiest in the state after Worcester and Talbot, but due to your overall high share of, 4th, right after Worcester, Talbot, and Montgomery, but due to your overall higher share of public school students, you're basically ranked 8th. There are 2 more issues we want to address, and that deals with the proposed funding reductions that was introduced by the governor in his proposed budget. He included around $31 million in reductions to state aid programs. Howard County's share of these reductions is around $3.1 million. These reductions affected the community college program and property tax assessments. However, his proposal had to be approved by the General Assembly. And as part of the state budget deliberations, the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee and the House Appropriations Committee jointly rejected these reductions. So they are not included, and they will not be included in the state final budget. So right now, all of these state aid programs are fully funded. In addition, the governor has introduced supplemental budget number 1, which will provide around $150 million in additional funding for public schools, and a portion of that funding will be provided to Howard County. So that concludes my presentation. There is a lot of information that I did not cover. We'll be more than happy to talk with you if you have any questions, but I just wanted to go over some of the main highlights.
Well, thank you very much for being here and sharing this information. I do see we have a question from Delegate Ebersol. If you can please try to be quick with that. And if it requires more conversation, maybe you can follow up offline.
It may, and no preamble here. Thank you for your presentation. It was excellent. On both pages 35 and 44, excuse me, you referenced local wealth and you talked about it with reference to farms. And my only question is that we sometimes have difficulty with that because community eligibility means we don't gather new farms data. Do you have any information about how we balance that out in that situation?
I will have to get back with you on that with our education analyst who basically deals with the certification of farm students.
Right. We just don't get new data on them from year to year. So there's always been concern with community eligibility, but thank you. Maybe we could have a conversation or you could get an answer from me on that.
Okay, very good.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Quick enough for you, Madam Chair. I tried to go fast.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mr. Birch, for being with us. Appreciate this information and appreciate the offer for any follow-up of additional questions that members.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. All right, members, our final item on our agenda for today, and I know the senators will not be participating, but we do want to take up election of our next House delegation chair. As you know, last year we, with our abrupt adjournment, it lingered through to the summer, but our next chair will take the role beginning with the beginning of the fiscal year in July. So we want to go ahead and have that election now. So I am happy to entertain a nomination.
I'd like to nominate Delegate Watson.
Wonderful. Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second.
And is there a lack of objection from the nominee?
Be happy to serve.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we can do this with a show of hands. All those in favor?
To close the nominations.
All right. Any opposition? Any opposed? I didn't see any. I think no one. Okay. All right. Was that a question? Okay.
That was a goodbye because we gotta go.
Oh, yes.
No,
Wait,
that's
one quick thing. Could we just I just wanted to make a point to thank you, Jessica, for all of your work this session. It was incredibly hard. And you too, Senator Lamb, really hard year to do it. And two, I just wanted to thank our interns. I know my intern, Zoe Smith, was fantastic working from home. I know all of you have interns. I know some of them are on this call. Just want to make sure we give them the gratitude they deserve.
I also want to thank Abby, our delegation administrator, for coming in very quickly at the beginning of the session to help with all of our delegation business. And she's been great. And Dara as well for your support as delegation counsel. We couldn't be doing what we're doing right now without your support. And also wanted to echo Delegate Watson's remarks. Thank Delegate Feldmark for a great opportunity to be able to work with you this year in the co-chair, as a co-chair. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. And it was a pleasure working with you, Senator Lamb. I appreciate your leadership, having done several years now in a row. Appreciate your leadership on the Senate side.
Cheers to all of you. Thank you guys for all of you, from the staff to the chairman, to the interns. You guys did a great job. It's very difficult times, and you just kept it rolling and kept us moving.
Absolutely.
So absolutely appreciate it.
Okay. And I know folks need to get themselves to